Here's a shocking truth that might make your morning coffee taste bitter. Every time Los Angeles turns on a tap, an ancient lake 300 miles away slowly dies a little more. In the high desert town of Levining, California, something extraordinary unfolds daily that most Southern Californians never witness and perhaps never want to. At the edge of Mono Lake, where a weathered sign optimistically declares this place an oasis in the desert, naturalist Ryan Garrett faces yet another group of unsuspecting visitors with uncomfortable truths about their water consumption. But here's where it gets controversial. This isn't ancient history. It's happening right now as you read this. Garrett's enthusiasm radiates as he introduces visitors to this remarkable saline lake, a million-year-old ecosystem that supports countless migrating birds. Yet beneath his warm welcome lies a stark reality. This natural wonder continues to suffer from decisions made in distant boardrooms and city halls. When Garrett explains how Los Angeles constructed its massive aqueduct system in the early 1900s, completely destroying Owens Lake in the process, you can almost hear the collective intake of breath from his audience. "Are they still taking water?" asks one woman, her voice carrying that particular note of disbelief reserved for learning uncomfortable truths. "Yes, they are still diverting water," comes Garrett's matter-of-fact reply, words that hang in the desert air like an indictment. And this is the part most people miss. The numbers tell a story of systematic environmental destruction that reads like a slow-motion disaster film. As the group moves along the trail, Garrett methodically reveals the lake's tragic decline through the decades. By 1951, the water had already dropped 7 feet below its natural level. By 1963, it had plummeted 25 feet. But the real gut punch comes with the revelation that by 1982, Mono Lake had fallen a devastating 45 feet from the levels that local indigenous peoples had known for generations. Think about that for a moment. In just 4 decades, human intervention had sliced nearly half the volume from a million-year-old ecosystem, doubling the lake's salinity in the process. The mathematical precision of this ecological vandalism is almost more disturbing than its scope. As visitors approach the shoreline, they find themselves dwarfed by the lake's famous tufa formations, towering, craggy structures of calcium carbonate that stretch nearly 20 feet above their heads. Garrett pauses dramatically beside these natural monuments, explaining how these extraordinary towers grew underwater around freshwater springs over thousands of years, only to be left high and dry as Los Angeles drained away their aquatic cradle. "If we were standing here in 1941, he tells the group, we would be completely underwater right now. Let that sink in. The very ground they're walking on should be lake bottom." But here's where the story takes an even more fascinating turn. These twice-daily educational tours, offered free throughout the summer months along the South Tufa Trail in the Mono Basin National Forest Scenic Area, represent something profound, a grassroots effort to force accountability through awareness. Some guides work for state parks, while others, like Garrett, represent the Mono Lake Committee, a nonprofit organization that refuses to let this environmental catastrophe fade into bureaucratic obscurity. At the water's edge, Garrett performs what might be considered an act of ecological theater. He crouches and dips a clear cup into the hypersaline water, emerging with a tiny passenger, a brine shrimp, one of an estimated 4 to 6 trillion that call Mono Lake home. This particular species exists nowhere else on Earth, making every gallon of diverted water a potential contributor to a unique extinction event. Then comes perhaps the most visceral moment of the tour. Garrett reaches directly into the lake and emerges with his palm covered in dark specks, alkali fly pupae, a traditional food source for the native Kutsaduka'a people. He encourages everyone to taste these unusual morsels. And inevitably, someone remarks on their salty flavor, seemingly unaware they're sampling the concentrated essence of environmental exploitation. Here's the ecological reality that should concern every Californian. These flies and brine shrimp serve as the foundation for an intricate food web supporting millions of migratory birds, including eared grebes, Wilson's phalaropes, and California gulls. When the lake becomes too saline due to reduced inflows, this entire ecosystem begins to collapse, a domino effect that ripples across the Pacific Flyway. The 1980s brought a remarkable awakening of environmental consciousness, symbolized by Save Mono Lake bumper stickers that appeared on vehicles throughout California. This grassroots movement culminated in a 1994 regulatory victory when state officials ordered the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power to reduce its diversions, theoretically allowing the lake to rise 17 feet toward a healthier level. But here's the uncomfortable question nobody wants to ask. After 3 decades, has this victory amounted to anything more than bureaucratic theater? Garrett provides a visceral answer. He opens his backpack and extracts a collapsible metal pole, extending it to its full 9-foot length. Standing it vertically on the sandy shore, he demonstrates that despite 31 years of supposed regulatory protection, Mono Lake remains far below its agreed-upon target level. So, the question now becomes, is Mono Lake doomed? He asks his audience, his voice carrying both challenge and hope. Is this the highest it can get? No, absolutely not. He acknowledges that Los Angeles has made significant strides in water conservation over the past 3 decades, a point that might surprise critics who view the city as an endless consumer of distant resources. Yet this raises a provocative question. If LA is using less water, why isn't Mono Lake recovering faster? The answer lies in a fascinating piece of regulatory foresight built into that 1994 decision. Officials included what amounts to a legal time bomb. If the lake level doesn't rise sufficiently, the State Water Resources Control Board must hold a hearing to determine whether the existing rules need fundamental changes. Both environmental advocates and water department managers now acknowledge this critical reassessment should happen soon. What's super exciting is that hearing is right around the corner, Garrett tells his audience, his voice rising with genuine anticipation. So right now is the best time to learn about Mono Lake because the next great effort to save Mono Lake is about to begin. But here's the controversial part that deserves deeper examination. Should urban California's growth and the millions of jobs, homes, and lives it supports be constrained by the needs of a remote desert lake? It's a question that cuts to the heart of how we balance human development with environmental stewardship in an increasingly water-scarce world. As the tour concludes, visitors often find themselves grappling with uncomfortable realizations. Gerardo Reyes, a roofing contractor from Rialto, who had never heard of Mono Lake before this visit, represents countless Southern Californians suddenly confronted with the hidden costs of their daily water use. Accompanied by his wife Jeanette and their 4 children, Reyes articulates the central dilemma with remarkable clarity. While LA needs water, the lake also needs it, and you've got to find a balance. His hope that this beautiful lake will still exist for his children and grandchildren to witness raises perhaps the most challenging question of all. In a region where population growth shows no signs of slowing, and climate change threatens to reduce water supplies even further, is such optimism realistic or naive? What do you think? Should Los Angeles be forced to dramatically reduce its water diversions, potentially constraining urban growth and economic development? To save a remote ecosystem that most residents will never see? Or does the greater good lie in supporting the millions of people who call Southern California home, even if it means accepting the sacrifice of places like Mono Lake? The upcoming state hearing will likely address these questions, but the answers will ultimately reflect our collective values about growth, sustainability, and environmental justice. Perhaps most provocatively, if you live in Southern California and have never visited Mono Lake, do you have any moral standing to weigh in on this debate? Sound off in the comments. This is exactly the kind of issue where passionate disagreement often leads to better solutions.